Hey there everyone! Different office, same goal. Mini recaps on some of the most requested topics from our last sections of Greek Civ. In this video, I want to do a recap of Socrates and his Socratic philosophy, while prefacing that Socrates himself appears in so many texts and often speaking so many different recommendations or questions that it can really be tough to pin down his philosophy or his beliefs to any sort of simple paradigm. Even in this class, we've actually read 4 texts, I think, in which Socrates appears. Xenophon's Economicus, the Apology, the Euthyphro, and of course Aristophanes' Clouds. But in order to make this simpler, I think a good recap can really boil down what we learned about Socrates to a couple of different areas. First of all, what is his method, right? What is the Socratic method of acquiring wisdom? Who are the targets of his questioning, right? Socrates isn't just randomly asking questions. He's also kind of poking the bear, or as he calls it, being the gadfly on the butt of the horse that is Athens. So who is he interested in sort of stinging? And then, of course, in as much as we can detect what are his core beliefs, right? And they might surprise us that they're not particularly content-based, but rather they're more linked to his beliefs about the right way to live a life of wisdom. So let's go through each of these method, targets, and beliefs, and then we'll kind of summarize at the end with a few points on where to go from here. So Socrates' method, at least according to the text that we have followed. I think of the 4 texts I mentioned, it's really Plato who gives us the clearest and probably most accurate image of what kind of teaching Socrates is doing. We know, of course, that Socrates' philosophic mission is set in motion. I'm thinking of bullet point 1, when his friend Chaerephon visits the oracle at Delphi, who pronounces that no one is wiser than Socrates. So Socrates will explain in the Apology that his entire method of asking questions, of interrogating people, is really in search of someone wiser. Can he prove the oracle wrong? Can he actually meet somebody in the polis of Athens who knows more than he does, or at least knows a better method for getting to the truth? And of course, Socrates really won't claim to find someone in the texts we've read, and so his questioning continues. And at least he is wise in knowing what he doesn't know. We also saw that an important part of Socrates' method is this elenchus, the refutation, right? He's not just giving long speeches about beauty or truth or justice or piety. What he's doing is having a dialogue with someone and asking this person questions repeatedly in order to narrow down or to sort of move laterally towards a more truthful or accurate picture. We see him do this with Euthyphro as he sort of forces Euthyphro to get more specific about what piety is. We also see him do this with the prosecutor Meletus as he really pushes back. Does Meletus know what corrupting the youth is? Does he actually know what is divine and what isn't? Third, Socrates will really emphasize again and again that the way that he thinks that human beings should try to arrive at wisdom is by a sort of rational, logical thought process, right? Pinning down definitions, seeing if those definitions apply to all circumstances, using analogies, right? What Socrates is not waiting around for is to be inspired by the muses, like we saw Hesiod or Theognis. He's not waiting to sort of have predictions made like a seer, like Euthyphro might. Right? He wants to have a replicable system of knowledge that can be taught and tested by anyone else. And finally, and this is what's maybe most amusing about Socrates, is that he's totally comfortable with aporia, with not knowing or not knowing how to get to a real answer. And this is because, of course, Socrates will reason that it is better to be aware of what you don't know than to at least think you know something when you really don't, right? Okay, if those are the core methods of Socrates, the Socratic method, who is he most interested in using it against, right? And we've seen in our discussions in the Apology and in the Euthyphro and even in the Clouds that there's a lot of different targets, but they're all unified by authority, right? Socrates is not trying to pick on the little guy. He's trying to pick on people or texts that have a lot of authority or importance in classical Athens. This might be someone like Euthyphro, the seer, right, who claims to have a real connection to the gods. or to poetic performers like the writers of tragedy, right, who are able to put on these kind of mythical plays like Oedipus and have the whole city watch them and admire them. He's taking on politicians like Meletus, right, who think that they know how to govern or lead Athens better. And of course, he's taking on myths. We saw that a little bit in the Euthyphro, where Socrates says, well, are you sure, Euthyphro, that that myth is really real? Should we really follow the teaching of the gods if that myth is maybe not something that's super admirable? And finally, Socrates is taking on the sophists, right? These other lovers of wisdom in late 5th century Athens who are teaching young men how to speak good, but maybe speaking good isn't the same as doing good, or speaking cleverly is not the same thing as being wise. So Socrates has a lot of targets, but again, they're not the little guy. They are all people with authority in classical Athens. Finally, when we think about what are Socrates' beliefs, we see that this is a person who is open to having his mind changed. He's truly interested in learning more. But I think alphabetically, we might want to think about Socrates' core beliefs as A, B, C, and D. A, aporia is okay. It's fine to acknowledge that you don't know something, rather than being the kind of person who pretends to know something. Think about those fake doctors in On the Sacred Disease, or someone like Euthyphro, who is ready to take his father to court, but he actually can't define what piety is when he's really pressed. B, being is not the same as seeming. Socrates does not take anything for granted. Just because something is considered acceptable or correct in everyday society, that doesn't mean that it actually is the correct thing or the just thing. So Socrates' true belief is that we need to consciously ask about what is versus what seems. C, for citizenship. Socrates, especially in the Apology, is going to try to redefine what it means to be a good member of the polis, not simply by just doing what everybody else does or following the rules or participating in state religion, but by constantly trying to improve the city through questioning. And D, of course, his daimonion. Socrates will never outright say he doesn't believe in the gods, but he will say that the god he most follows is that daimonion, that little inner spirit who tells him what not to do or what not to get involved in, like a voice of conscience maybe. And so between those, the A, B, C, and D, I think we can get a sense of what is at the core of Socrates' belief system. All right, as you guys go on to keep studying for the final exam, again, try to keep these 3 elements in mind. Who are his targets? What is his method? What are his beliefs? And I think that the most important step you could pursue once you've got a good handle on those things is where can we see each of those elements, his targets, his methods, and beliefs, in the 3 core texts that we read about Socrates, the Euthyphro, the Apology, and the Clouds, right? I think it would be really helpful for you to go into the final exam knowing that the Socrates character in the Clouds is really different from the Socrates character in the Apology because of the, X, Y, and Z. If you could kind of highlight those differences, especially differences of the targets, the methods, and beliefs, I think you'd be in really good shape. All right, hope this was helpful.